again today on this early Sunday morning. I think it's around 6:45. So today I'm going to discuss the G major overture, and its nickname is the Overture for a Wedding because I wrote this piece last summer in honor of a high school friend getting married, although unfortunately I never ended up playing the piece at the actual wedding. And to be honest, it did take me quite a while to learn and perfect this piece. And so we'll start with an analysis, or at least a discussion on what the form is. And for those of you familiar with the Baroque era, I think you could recognize that this is what we would call a French overture. Now, a French overture was coined by the Italian-French composer Jean-Baptiste Lully. Initially, French overtures are pieces with 3 sections. The first and the third are slow and majestic, and there's dotted rhythms with 30-second notes, and then we end on the dominant and briefly return to the tonic, and we repeat that first section. The third section is almost similar to the first in the sense that it's almost like a recap of everything that we heard in the first section, but things are a little bit different. While the middle section is often faster, more like a fugue, if not in some cases a full-blown fugue, and often they're in dance time signatures like 6/8 or 9/8, and we repeat the opening once, then we have the fugue, and then we have the ending, and then we repeat the fugue, and then we repeat the ending. So in Baroque music there are a lot of repeats, obviously, and the best examples of French overtures that you can look at are let's take the third orchestral suite by Johann Sebastian Bach, BWV 1068. Even though the fugal section to that isn't necessarily in a gigue time, it's in common time, but the rest of the overture is very dramatic. Handel also wrote very good overtures for the keyboard and especially for strings. I think one of his Concerti Grossi in D minor begins with a very elegant French overture. And as a disclaimer, not all overtures have to have 3 sections to be considered a French overture. The D major partita, BWV 828, also by Bach, the opening overture to that partita only contains 2 different sections. And if you remember the discussion that I made on my G minor overture, that was a typical French overture in the sense that it had 3 different sections. And if you want, I can link the discussion video in the description of this discussion video. So now let's move on to a little analysis, I suppose, of this piece. So there are, within the first 4 bars alone, there are, I guess, what you'd call 2 miniature statements. We open with the tonic. We have a brief flourish to the dominant. Sorry. I guess you would call that either a phrase or a half phrase. And there we are back to the tonic. Now, the art of interpreting this piece, especially on the piano, is to, if you're playing this piece on the piano, you wouldn't play the piano as if it's a piano. I think most pianists will know that the idea of playing the piano is to get the piano to sound like something else. In this case, you'd maybe want it to sound like an organ or even a harpsichord, or maybe even a fanfare of trumpets or strings. But how you would accomplish that as a pianist, I don't know, because I am not necessarily a pianist or even a really good pianist. But on the harpsichord, you could definitely ad lib in terms of ornamentation and definitely with timing. Even in the opening chord, you could add a trill. And I'll admit that articulation is easier on the harpsichord, especially when you have the dotted rhythms and the fast 30-second notes and that sort of thing. So, bar 5, we have the tonic again, and then we fall briefly to C. Sorry. Now that's an interesting point, because C is the 6th of G, but it's also C is the 4th of G major, but C is also the 6th of E minor. So here we're moving to the key of E minor. Let's begin at bar 6. There's our brief cadence to E. Now, I remember when I first wrote this piece, I posted it on the Facebook page of the group Vox Seculorum, which is a modern-day Baroque composer group. I guess I can link them in the description as well. And one of the questions that one of the users had for me was, in bar 6, why don't I make that a full C major chord instead of an inversion? And you hear how it sounds a little bit empty without the C in the very bass. Instead, it's a little bit less certain. But then we have the full, I guess you'd call it a 1-5 in the key of E, moving to a 5-7 in E. So, I guess part of this video is going to be discussing the ideas of programmaticism versus absolute in music. And some of you might not know that to be a programmatic piece of music is something that describes or represents a force of nature or an emotional state. And the most famous example I can come up with is, of course, The Four Seasons by Antonio Vivaldi. The concerti accompany quatrains Vivaldi had written based on the seasons. And each stanza of each quatrain is a movement from the concerti. I don't have them with me. I haven't really read them in depth. I think only once or twice in passing, but we can hear how the words represent the music and vice versa. But I'm of the belief that with Baroque music in particularly, if it makes you imagine something, and if it makes you feel something, or definitely if you think of something while writing the piece of music, or if the music represents something in your life, then it is not absolute. I don't think that any Baroque music is absolute. And what absolutism means that a form is simply a form and nothing else. So, a fugue is nothing more than just a fugue. And this leads to an almost philosophical debate, because is the piece of music, if it has a programmatic title, really relating to what the title relates to? Or can anybody just call a piece of music by a creative title, even if the music doesn't represent anything, really? I could say that this is an overture based on my love of cake. But is it really, though? No. This is an overture for a wedding, really. And in terms of what the married couple might be experiencing throughout the ceremony, there might be a sense of, not necessarily hesitation, but giddy nervousness, I think you would say. And this is represented throughout certain parts. And I didn't mean for that to be such a long transition, but in bar, 6, where we have this C major chord, and it's not fully fleshed out as a C major chord, because, well, maybe your ground might be a little bit lost because of what you're thinking throughout. So we have this C major falling to an E minor, there we go, and then an E7, and a full E minor chord. And this leads directly into a sequence. In G major, and notice that the bass moves up from E and G, D and A, back to G and B, but the qualities around it are all minor based. But we move from an E to D, but it's an inversion because the F sharp is in the bass instead of. So harmonically, E minor, D major, back to E minor. A rather odd harmonic progression, you'd say. And you would take your time, probably, in this sequence. There we are, back to the tonic of G major. And then we modulate to the dominant, but because it's the first ending, back to 1 after the first ending. And of course, what happens after the first ending? We repeat the entire first section. And I think when I wrote this piece, I had in mind that the idea that you would play the opening section as the first party of the couple walks up the aisle, and then as the second party of the couple walks up the aisle. And then the fugal section would be played as they both, well, after they're officially married, and then they walk back down the aisle. And I might come back to this first section because I might remember something that I forgot to talk about. So the fugal section isn't necessarily a full-blown fugue. It's more of just, really, it's just a jig. Now, it's short. It's only 2 voices throughout, which isn't really a bad thing. Most of the jigs that I write for keyboard are definitely in the 2-voice scheme of things. It has a perky little subject. Simple. We hear everything in G major and then in D. And harmonically, there isn't really anything complicated about it. Maybe because weddings, for the most part, also aren't complicated. I don't know. It's interesting because in this piece, at first everything is all in the treble clef. All the action is in the treble clef. And then what happens is that we move to the bass. Marriage and the marriage process must be a little bit like teamwork. So what happens is that the 2 parts, at first there might be a little bit of conflict. Sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't work together, but eventually everything all makes sense and everything ends perfectly. And I suppose that's interesting to think about. Lately I've been really thinking about the ideas of, again, programmaticism versus absolutism in music. And I think it might be because I just love the Baroque era too much that I have these beliefs about it. But I think the beginning ideals of the Baroque composers were for the music to excite the listeners, to invite them to feel and experience things through music as best as they could. And reading up on what the works of Monteverdi did in his day and the purpose of his music was something that I think can still be done. I think in the video that I made about my senior recital, I wrote something of the following, saying essentially that if we're happy, do we not want to share that happiness with other people? And how could that not be reflected in music? I'll agree that if I'm, well, I don't want to say in an overall dark mood, but we all have times that we're happy and that we're not happy. So why should the resulting music not be reflecting of our current state of mind? Now, I guess you could say that this piece is an exception because I wasn't necessarily, I don't think, happy when I wrote this piece, but I knew that I wanted it to represent something. But at the same time, if you're writing something as I guess nice as this piece might be, you'd probably want to think of moments in your life where you're happy and have that come across through the music. I don't know if I'm rambling on or not. I don't know what I think. I guess I'll just play the entire jig. So there we go. That's the end. And it's that simple, I suppose. I guess that's the end of the video, really. I knew that I wanted to make this discussion video. I don't really think I had much to say other than what the piece is about and my ideas on what music could be, if not should be, because I know these days there is a lot to think of in terms of musical philosophies, and I know it's all more subjective than we're all willing to admit. Regardless, thank you for watching, and I hope you liked it. And I won't get to posting this video, I don't think, until the beginning of August, but I can promise you that I'll have another discussion video ready by the end of next Sunday, and I'll upload it either Monday or maybe even the day after. So I hope you liked the video, and let me know if there's any particular piece of mine that you want me to record for next week and make a video on for next week. And I'll see you all later.